So we're here with the Finance Minister of Alberta. Thank you so much, Minister Toews, for taking the time to talk to us. I'd like to start our conversation with the theme of COVID, because that's, of course, not your responsibility, but it does affect the finances of the province, I imagine. So my question is, how is this crisis we're going through affecting both spending and the outlook for revenue?
Sure, Carlos. Well, that's a very timely question, and we're now, I think, like many jurisdictions, we're now in our fourth wave, and there's been probably how I would characterize as perhaps a diminishing effect on the economy with each wave. At least that's been our experience to date. Maybe to put it this way, we've seen increasing resiliency in the economy with each wave, but after saying that, it certainly is affecting certain aspects of our economy even now, and particularly the accommodation, food service sector, tourism sector in the province of Alberta. Obviously, the airline sector is affected, and that is concerning. If I look back to the first wave of COVID, the spring of 2020, we were really dealing with a difficult time in the province. At that point, we had a pandemic that was bearing down on the province of Alberta, on the nation as a whole. Of course, we were experiencing, a massive contraction in the global economy, and of course, with Alberta's trade-exposed sectors, that was very concerning. And of course, kind of the number 3 item in the triple black swan event was an unprecedented collapse in energy prices. And so in the spring of 2020 and the ensuing summer, we were really quite hard hit as a province.
And this time around, does it not compromise your, because you have an improved outlook for the provincial budget that you posted recently. Is that changing in any way because of the impact of COVID?
At this point in time, we have really factored in the reality that we are in a pandemic into our projections. And so back in February of this year, I presented Budget 2021. At that point, we projected 4.8%, which was relatively robust growth, but really a recovery from what we had lost the previous year, which was very significant. Recently, probably a month ago, I presented our Q1, quarter 1 fiscal update, and I can say that our economic prospects have improved. Certainly, it's also improved our fiscal outlook for the current year. We're projecting 6.7% real GDP growth for the current year, and that anticipates some continued bumps along the way with, given the fact that we're still dealing with the pandemic.
Understood. And of course, on the bright side for the province this year, oil prices haven't been this high since 2018, if I'm not mistaken. And will that speed up the path to a balanced budget? Will that be enough, more than enough, to offset the impact of the pandemic?
Well, higher energy prices are absolutely welcome here in the province of Alberta, and certainly for our fiscal situation. It will result in a much improved fiscal picture. In Budget 2021, we were projecting a $18.2 billion deficit for the current fiscal year, a very, very significant deficit. And on our Q1 projection, we've seen massive improvement, really massive improvement on the revenue side, again, in part, in significant part, due to the increase in energy prices. So we've seen an increase in revenue projections of $11 billion. And so we're now projecting a deficit of approximately 7.8 billion for the current fiscal year. So much improved fiscal projection over the budget. Now, in terms of expenditures, we have set aside some contingency funds for dealing with the pandemic, and as well as for dealing with the economic challenge that the pandemic has created. We set up a $1.25 billion health contingency. And again, that was earmarked to deal with additional pandemic costs and pressures. At this point, I'm glad we set that contingency up. We also created a $500 million contingency to assist us in positioning the province for economic recovery and growth. The reason we included that amount in a contingency is we were in the process of developing sector strategies and plans, and we knew the funding would be important, but at that point we didn't have a clear line of sight on the definitive programming. So again, I think it was important that we set those amounts aside, and so we'll be drawing on those as we experience pressures from the pandemic.
I see. But now, despite these higher prices for oil, the level of investment and jobs in the oil sands is nowhere near what we had when oil was 100 a barrel, quite a few years ago now. How are the efforts to diversify the economy going to make it more resilient?
Sure, and that's obviously a concern of ours as a government, and certainly a priority of this government. And I know it's a priority for Albertans to see further economic diversification in the province of Alberta. Firstly, I'll say this. Granted, back in 2012 to 2014, during that period, we saw absolutely massive investment in the Alberta energy industry and the oil sands. And part of that was simply, that was the stage we were in. That was an asset that was, I would suggest, in kind of the early to mid stages of development, and capital requirements were very, very significant. Fortunately, right now, we're benefiting from the production of that investment, and as well as the tens of thousands of jobs that continue as a result of that production. And right now, I would also say that while growth in the oil sands is going to be projected to be somewhat limited, at least in the foreseeable future, we are seeing additional investment come on in the conventional oil and gas industry in the province, as again brought on by increased energy prices and gas prices. So all that to say, I'm very hopeful that we're going to see increasing investment in the oil and gas industry. But to your point, we're not likely to see anything like we had in 2014, when we had massive amounts of capital deployed in oil sands infrastructure. So diversification is important, and part of our economic recovery plan really looks to position this province for disproportionate investment attraction and economic diversification. So we came out with that economic recovery plan actually way back in July of 2020. It seems like a long time ago, and it was largely a framework at the time, a framework that included a reboot on regulatory reform, red tape reduction wherever possible, but certainly regulatory modernization, which we really viewed as critically important for investment attraction, to critically important to ensure the competitiveness of our particularly trade-exposed sectors, but our economy as a whole. At the time, we also accelerated our job creation tax cut, moving our corporate tax rate from 10 to 8% immediately, effective July 1st, 2020, at a time when many jurisdictions were considering tax increases. We wanted to ensure that the global investment community knew that this province would deliver on reducing its business tax rate to 8%. We also started on a series of sector strategies at that point, and those strategies included our traditional sectors such as energy and forestry, and certainly agriculture was included. But they included new sectors like the tech sector, the film sector here in the province, financial services sector, and others. The tourism sector, although that sector has been challenged ever since the onset of the pandemic, but I believe it has great potential here in the province. And so we started putting together those strategies, sector strategies in industries where we believed we had natural competitive advantages, but would benefit from, again, the government positioning them in an advantageous way. And so, early results are encouraging. In 2020, in the tech industry, for instance, Alberta doubled its venture capital investment attraction to almost $500 million. And 2021 is starting off even better. We're seeing tech companies choose Alberta for their head offices. RBC recently announced that they were moving a tech hub into Calgary. mCloud announced that they were moving their head office into Calgary. We've had announcements from Emphasis and Infosys and other tech sector participants that really recognize the value proposition in the province of Alberta, recognize that we have a very young, educated demographic here, world-class institutions, a relatively low cost of living, and an extremely competitive business environment.
So it seems it's gaining some traction. Now, I'd like to ask you a little bit about one theme that came up during this federal election, which was the theme of the cost of living. We have inflation in the cost of materials, metals, crops, and consumer goods and foods. So it's become a global issue, the issue of inflation. And on the other hand, another theme that was very present in this election is the issue of government spending. Even on the conservative side, there were people who agreed that some level of spending is necessary to help Canadians go through this crisis, this pandemic. Now, government spending plus inflation, isn't that a recipe for higher borrowing costs, higher interest rates? And from the point of view of Alberta, are you concerned about that, the cost of servicing the debt?
Absolutely. If I wasn't concerned about the cost of debt servicing, I shouldn't have the role that I have in the province of Alberta. It's absolutely a concern. And I guess on a number of fronts, we're looking to deal with it. Firstly, from day one, as soon as we took office, we really worked hard to make good on our commitment to Albertans that we would bring responsible fiscal management to the province of Alberta. And while the pandemic and great economic challenge have necessarily required some additional spending, certainly in health, also in some business supports and relief, at the same time, we've also been focused on delivering government services most efficiently. In fact, we inherited a government spend that was over $10 billion higher than comparator provinces on a per capita basis. And the first fiscal plan that we presented carefully and thoughtfully over our 4-year term brought those costs down on a per capita costs to align with other provinces. We really believed that Alberta could no longer afford to be an outlier. And I'm happy to report that we continue to be on track with that plan. In fact, by 22-23, in other words, the next fiscal year, we start to see our costs of delivering government services start to fall within the range, per capita range of the other provinces. And in my view, that's absolutely critical. Of course, the other side of the equation, in my view, is to grow our fiscal capacity. And that's what our economic recovery plan is all about. It's about positioning the province for investment attraction and economic growth, and thereby growing our fiscal capacity. All of that, of course, will result in reduced need to borrow money, which impacts, of course, our exposure on the debt service side. But we really have seen a number of factors contribute to this inflationary environment. We've obviously central bank monetary policy over the last 2 years, stimulus spending from largely especially our federal government here in the nation of Canada, and at the same time, supply chain disruption has really created an environment that will encourage inflation. That's what we're seeing right now. Our projection is that in the current year that we're in, 2021, we're going to be looking at inflation rates of somewhere at around 3%, maybe slightly under, and that tailing down to just around 2.5%, 2.4% next year, and then dropping off to approximately 2%. You know, a place where central bankers tend to like it. And so, you know, economists that I talk to, many of them believe that the inflation issue we're dealing with now is transitory, that it will pass, but it is a concern, and it really validates the importance of responsible fiscal management.
The other question I have regarding the elections is the relationship with the federal government. Are you going to try to reset that relationship following the elections? Now, what are the main issues you would like the federal government to help Alberta with?
Well, we're going. Sure. We're going to work as constructively as possible with the federal government. In terms of Alberta's priorities, at a high level, I've been concerned with declining investment, actually in the nation, but especially in the goods-producing sectors, really right across the country. And we will be advocating for the federal government to bring in policy that will encourage productivity and improve our competitiveness, result in increased investment attraction, again, especially in the goods-producing sector. So that will be a focus of ours in our relationship with the federal government. That's certainly the way we're looking to position the province of Alberta right now. And we're concerned that if the federal government doesn't make that a priority, that the great prosperity that we've enjoyed as a nation may not be shared by future generations. And so that, to me, is a critical priority. Now, we also certainly want to work with the federal government on ensuring that the energy industry, the Canadian energy industry, is well positioned to be competitive. I think it's important that the energy industry in Canada, that there's recognition given to its great contribution to our economy right across the country. And it's an industry that is the most environmentally and socially responsible industry in the world. There will be demand for Canadian energy for decades to come. And so we're going to be working with the federal government to just ensure that we have the right environment for that industry to continue to succeed and grow. And part of that is working with the industry on a continuum of improvement in terms of environmental and social governance issues. And so in terms of decarbonization, the Canadian energy industry has been working at that for years and years and has made great progress. We advocated during the last federal budget for the federal government to come out with an investment tax credit for carbon capture and storage investment infrastructure. And we were pleased that that was announced as part of the budget. We'll be working to ensure that credit is calibrated to be sufficient to encourage investment in that important infrastructure.